Why don't we start with a short period of meditation together, just to settle in and arrive, and kind of to orient and set our intentions together. So do whatever helps you to shift gears, taking a few deep breaths, rolling your shoulders or your neck. I know I like to generally look around the room where I am. And this is a process when you connect with your environment through your senses, your eyes, your ears. This is called orienting. It's something that mammals do naturally. And it lets us know that, at least physically, in our environment, that we're safe, which is pretty essential for contemplative practice. So, just let your eyes take in the space around us. If there's something pleasing to your eye, you can let your gaze linger there. And in your own time, when you're ready, you can turn your attention inwards, closing your eyes or just softening your gaze. And so what helps you to arrive? Maybe consciously setting aside any plans, thoughts of the past or future, some of the momentum of getting out of the house and getting here. Kind of sending a signal on the mental level that all that's done now. We're here. And in this moment, there's nothing else we need to do. Nothing we need to take care of, sort out, or figure out. I often find it helpful to root my awareness in the felt sensations of sitting. So, like a stone sinking down through a clear pool of water. Seeing if you can allow your attention to very slowly, naturally begin to settle and sink into your body. Perhaps feeling the contact with the ground beneath you. Really seeing if you can sense the weight, the pressure and heaviness of the body contacting the earth. Allowing your whole being to receive that very basic primary signal of gravity, of that firm, steady contact that says, We're here. Just feel this. Allowing those sensations of firmness, weight, or heaviness to begin to steady your attention. Allowing things to gather and collect. Around the very simple experience of feeling the body sitting. You might become aware of your posture, a sense of the spine and the torso being upright. Seeing if you can relax and soften any areas of tension or tightness around the eyes, the jaw, the neck or shoulders, even all the way down the arms into the hands, letting your hands be soft and relaxed. So we begin with the ground, contact with the earth. And then we find structure in the spine and the body, a sense of being alert and awake. And as we sit in this very simple, quiet way, at some point you've probably noticed that the body's breathing. If you like, allowing yourself to tune in to the rhythm and sensations of breathing in and breathing out. So, in the last couple of minutes of sitting quietly together, I invite you to reflect on your intention in being here this weekend. What is it that's bringing you here? What's important to you? So just ask that question and then listen. See what comes inside. Whatever you find, I invite you to distill that down to its essence. If you had to sum it up in a word, one word or a phrase, what would that be? What is it that you're longing for or valuing that's bringing you here? And finally, Once you've kind of captured that deep intention in a word or a phrase, what happens if you say that word silently to yourself? How do you know it's important to you? What's it feel like to be conscious of this deep intention? So, I'd love to hear what some of those deeper intentions are that are bringing us together. And so I'm wondering if anyone would be willing to share just what that word or phrase was that you came to. Quality of connection. Connection without losing autonomy. So that sense of the balance, the dynamic balance of connection and autonomy. Connection to life. Thank you. Abundance. Yeah, Joanne? The wisdom to know the difference of what to say and what not to say. Peacefulness.
You say it's to communicate so that it's a better experience for myself and for others. Ultimately, the word that came was like all ends with love. That's really.
Yeah. So the word was love. And then the flavor was a sense of being able to communicate in a way that's better for oneself and others, which seems like that's like an expression or a manifestation of love for you. Yeah, thank you. Being. Yeah, just connecting with that deep sense of what it is to be here. Thank you. Kindness. Yeah, notice how it is to hear these values and words, Ralph. Freedom. Yeah.
The connection between Buddhism and nonviolent communication.
Yeah, so very specifically a sense of learning and understanding this connection between Buddhism and nonviolent communication. Yeah. Mile.
Presence with unconditional acceptance. The word is suchness.
Suchness. Presence with unconditional acceptance. Let's do 2 or 3 more. Kim, I saw your hand.
Practicing embodiment in community.
Embodiment in community. Alan, and then this person with glasses. Passion. Compassion.
Sharing joy and beauty.
Sharing joy and beauty. Wonderful. And so notice how it felt to identify these deep aspirations. And so even that much, I find, can be helpful. Getting clear about where we want to come from, what's actually most important to us, and then not just on an intellectual level, right? Actually taking it in to our body and feeling how and where we know this to be true. That in and of itself can be a practice. To be aware of these deep intentions, to be aware of one's connection with being, or love or peacefulness or compassion or presence, or the balance between connection and autonomy, and not just on the intellectual level, to actually sense in one's body the value of that and to try to stay connected to it in the flow of one's life or conversation can be a practice. The tricky part, of course, is that the force of our habits, the momentum of the years of relating and communicating in certain ways is often so strong that our intentions are not enough. Right? We need skills. We need tools to translate these deep intentions into action. So this is what I've been passionate about for the last couple of decades of my life. So how do we actually translate these deep intentions into our life? So I started practicing meditation when I was pretty young. I was about 19. I was in college. I dove in head first. I went to India and went to live at a Buddhist monastery for 3 months, and then traveled around sitting retreats and visiting ashrams and monasteries for another 3 months. And it changed my life radically. I was a childhood actor. I was in New York, like auditioning and in theater and everything. And I found the Dharma. I found this path of self-understanding and wisdom and compassion. And it just radically reoriented me in the world. But what I found after a few years of practice was that the experiences I was having on my own, when my eyes were closed, when I was meditating on a retreat, or just even day to day, would very quickly evaporate whenever I had a disagreement with someone. If I got into an argument with a coworker, forget about family. Peace and compassion and love would just sort of vanish very quickly. And so I recognized, okay, if this stuff isn't showing up in my conversations and relationships, what good is it? It's great to be able to sit there with your eyes closed and feel loving kindness for the world and peace and everything, but, if you can't live it in the moment of being challenged, then it's not actually serving its purpose. So it was about that time that I came across the work of a man named Dr. Marshall B. Rosenberg, who many of you are probably familiar with, who is the founder of nonviolent communication. And in this practice of nonviolent communication, which I'll say a lot more about over the course of our weekend, I found a method to translate the deep values and experiences that I was having in meditation practice into my communication, into my relationships, into my conversations, even in the difficult moments. So here in the West, the way these teachings have come over and been transmitted, the central focus has been on the inner contemplative side of the path, the silent meditation practice, the meditation retreats, the progress of insight, and these kind of deeper experiences of understanding consciousness and looking within. But the reality is that the path that the Buddha taught and the way it's been practiced for millennia is a holistic way of life. It's not just about meditating with one's eyes closed. And any of you who have studied the Eightfold Noble Path and some of the teachings from the early texts, as I know many of you have, are well aware that, meditative training is just one aspect of this cultivation, which is a much more holistic sense of understanding, how am I relating to life? How do I make choices? How do I earn my living? How do I treat others? How do I treat myself? What guides my ethical sense in life? Am I learning from my mistakes? How do I relate to society? All of these are questions that are dealt with in the early texts from 2,600 years ago, and there's guidance for all of those. So I was inspired to kind of set out on this path of exploring communication as a contemplative practice, as a form of spiritual transformation, when I sat a retreat with the Vietnamese Zen master, poet, and activist Thich Nhat Hanh. And in the tradition that he founded, which is kind of a blend of the Insight Theravada schools and the more Mahayana Zen school from Vietnam that he was trained in, they take what are known as the 5 precepts or the 5 mindfulness trainings very seriously. So for those of you, again, who have practiced some in insight meditation, these 5 trainings are the foundation of ethical living: to refrain from killing, stealing, causing harm with our sexual energy, causing harm with our speech, often known as right speech, which we'll be exploring this weekend, and then to abstain from intoxicants that cloud the mind and lead to all those other things. So in the Insight tradition, we take the precepts regularly. In Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, they make a really big deal out of it. There's a whole ceremony. You get a certificate. There's like this sense of this is not just a one-time thing. You're actually making a deep commitment in your life to take on these trainings. So at the time that I sat this retreat, I was in my early 20s. I was still doing drugs. I was still sleeping around. So, I heard these teachings and I took them really seriously. And I'm sitting there going like, and they take them to a very refined level. So for example, like not stealing. They don't just consider that, literally stealing. They say like, well, where's your, if you have extra savings, how is it invested? Are you looking at socially responsible investing or how your use of resources? So they really look at the principles behind these trainings. So I listened to their teaching on each of these, and I felt like I couldn't, in my heart of hearts, wholly commit to any of them without making major changes in my life, except the right speech one. I said, okay, that one I'm ready. I want to take that on. And it wasn't that I wasn't practicing the precepts, but the level of commitment they were asking for, the level of integrity and deep investigation, I could tell in myself, I'm not ready for that. I want to go in that direction, but I can't in full integrity make that commitment yet. So I want to read to you the way this training in right speech is phrased by Thich Nhat Hanh. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen, I vow to cultivate loving speech and deep listening in order to bring joy and happiness to others and relieve others of suffering. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I vow to learn to speak truthfully with words that inspire self-confidence, joy, and hope. I am determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain, and not to criticize or condemn things of which I am not sure. I will refrain from uttering words that can cause division or discord, or that can cause the family or community to break. I will make all efforts to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. Pretty inspiring, huh? The magnitude of the vision of what's possible in terms of crafting our speech, our communication, our listening in line with these deep intentions to bring joy and happiness to others, to relieve others of their suffering, to contribute to the happiness and confidence of others, and to really take care with our words. One of the quotes from the early texts, the Buddha says, "Better than 1,000 useless words is one word which brings peace." So within the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha offers a whole range of teachings on how to work with communication. I teach a whole week-long retreat on this topic of looking at the intersection between these and really looking at some of the texts and saying, how does this apply? How do we translate this? So the most common teaching that we hear, which is what we'll look at first, is these guidelines on what are known as right speech, which in some places traditionally is thought of in the negative, to refrain from false speech, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle speech. And then in other places, they show up in the positive as what to cultivate. But if you start to look at the early texts and read them, you see that those are just like 2 points. That there are many, many examples and ways and places where the Buddha talks about communication, either directly or indirectly through example, by how he relates, by how he speaks. And so what one starts to get the sense of is that all of these teachings on communication and speech work together like a matrix. And they speak to different situations and scenarios because communication is complex. There's so much going on. And it's very context sensitive. There's so many factors that being skillful is going to look different in different situations. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by just looking at one of the basic templates that the Buddha offers and taking it as a teaching in and of itself to see what we can learn from it. So the basic teaching on right speech, as I just mentioned, is to refrain from 4 kinds of speech. False speech, so saying things that are not true. Harsh speech, saying things that have a biting or sharp tone that cause harm in terms of how we say it. Divisive speech, speech that separates people, pits them against one another. And then idle speech, which is understood as useless speech, speech that has no purpose whatsoever. And to me, this doesn't mean chit-chat. Chit-chat serves a purpose often. It's a way of connecting, of enjoying one another's company, of catching up. I don't think that's what's meant. I think what's meant by idle speech is when we're just filling the time, wasting our words, wasting our energy. Idle speech is draining for the speaker and the listener. So these guidelines, false speech, speech that is spoken with the intent of misrepresenting the truth. Divisive speech, speech that's spoken with the intent of dividing or separating people. Harsh speech, speech that's spoken with the intent of harming another or hurting their feelings. And then idle speech, speech with no purpose whatsoever. We can look at the positive side of them in another teaching that the Buddha gives on how to speak in a way that's in line with these teachings. In one place, the Buddha summarizes all of the teachings on right speech. And, so what's the essence? What's the essence of right speech? Someone asked me this once. And I love the question, because if we really come down to it, the essence of right speech is using communication and words in service of awakening. That's why it's one of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, is because our speech has the potential to further our own awakening and liberation. There's some very important reasons for this, because language and communication plays a very key role in human life, and it holds a very unique position in our consciousness. You think about how important our relationships are in life. Think about some of the most joy and happiness you've experienced. I wouldn't be surprised if no small number of those memories involve other people. And then consider the flip side. Think about some of the hardest times, some of the most pain you felt. Loss, disconnection, right? Relationship. So we are deeply social, relational creatures. And what determines the quality of our relationships to a large degree is our communication, right? A relationship is a series of interactions, and it's our communication that is forming and shaping those interactions. So this is one reason why speech training, communication training, can play such an important role in our awakening, is that it's shaping our relationships, which make up such a big part of our life. This path is about ending suffering. So how much of our suffering comes from relationships? Right? If our communication is more skillful, a lot of that suffering can be ended. The other reason why communication and speech training can play such a key role in awakening is the role that language has in shaping our reality. Desmond Tutu said, language doesn't describe reality, language creates reality. The ways in which we think and perceive shape how we experience ourselves, one another, and the world. So as we begin to investigate and work with our speech, our listening, and our communication, we actually contact the very mechanisms of the mind that are structuring our reality. So it's a very potent place to investigate and practice. Communication, it stands at this very unique position in consciousness. It's at the same time internal, external, and relational. So the words that I'm speaking right now are originating as something that's inside me, right? The thoughts and ideas that are forming are coming from within my own mind. They're being expressed externally, and then they're entering your mind. So what's internal here, through communication, becomes internal in your own consciousness. It's fascinating, isn't it? Just that we have this capacity. The last reason I just want to say around why speech is such a powerful training for awakening, we're doing it all day long. Right? Unless you're living on a mountain somewhere, and if you're in this room, you're not, we are communicating all day long. Even when we're alone, we're reading the news, we're on social media, we're thinking, that inner narrative that's going. So communication is like the warp and woof of our life, which means that when we take on speech, as a training, when we take on communication as a part of our spiritual practice, we can be practicing all the time. It's not just that half hour in the morning or the 45 minutes at the end of the day. It's something we can do all the time. So, if the essence of right speech is words that lead to awakening, in another place the Buddha says, right speech is using words to increase healthy, wholesome qualities in the mind and to decrease unhealthy, unwholesome qualities in the mind, in the speaker and the listener. So how often do our conversations have that as a goal or an effect, right? To increase the healthy qualities in our mind. This is the potential, this is the offering of these teachings, is that we can we can make our communication and speech into a craft. That the very words and conversations we have, that the process of communicating is one of honing our own heart, moving us in the direction of more well-being and inner freedom and clarity. So the first way of doing this are these guidelines that the Buddha gives. And I mentioned them in the negative. I want to mention them in the positive. And as you listen, I'll say a few words about each of them. As you listen, I want you to reflect and see which of these, as you hear, do you feel a natural sense of alignment with already? That you say, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at that. Like that's a strength of mine. That comes easily to me. Or maybe I've worked on that one already and I've made a lot of progress there. And which do you listen to and you go, yeah, I could stand to learn a little bit about that one. You know, I tend to drift in that area. I could bring a little bit more attention and clarity to that. So the 4 guidelines in the positive are to say that which is truthful, that which is helpful or useful, that which is kind, and that which is timely or appropriate to the context. So truthful, helpful, kind, and timely. So I want to say a few words about each of these and invite you to listen and reflect, and then we'll do an exercise. I also want to say that this particular segment right now, this is the most I will be speaking at one clip all weekend, just sort of laying out the terrain. So truthfulness, this is in many ways about what we say. So the Buddha emphasized this in some respects above all else. Sometimes it's taken to be one of the most important guidelines because the whole path itself is about discovering the truth. So what does it mean if our words are not in line with the truth? The understanding is that when we say things that are not true, it fragments the mind. We actively work against our own ability to see clearly. So this guideline of truthfulness is about speaking, not just not telling lies, but really investigating what's actually true. What do I know to be true? Is this my belief or view? Do we state our beliefs as the truth? Even in small ways. That was the best movie ever. Is that true? Is it more true to say, I loved that movie? Is it even more true to say, that was one of the best movies I've seen in a long time? Right? So we can bring this level of nuance to what we're saying, how we're speaking. When we don't speak in line with the truth, it agitates the mind. There's a way in which the mind becomes divided against itself because a part of the mind knows one thing and another part is saying or pretending something else. So it fragments and complicates the mind. Another way of thinking about this guideline is how can we speak in a way that is in line with the deepest truth that we know? How can our words become an expression of the Dharma, of the deepest understanding that we have of what it is to be human or to be alive? And so just consider how the world would be different if everyone followed just this one part of the training in right speech. If governments didn't lie. So this is a tenet for a better world. It reflects and supports our inner clarity, supports simplicity in life, and it supports a healthy, harmonious society and civilization. So the second guideline is to say that which is helpful or useful. So this is about why we're speaking. What's our purpose? What's our motivation? We can be truthful and still cause harm, right? Well, I was just telling the truth. I was just being honest. Right? We blast someone. How often are we aware of our purpose in speaking? How often are we really clear about why we're opening our mouth? So am I speaking intentionally, consciously, or am I in the grip of habit or reactivity? So mindfulness gives us some degree of non-reactivity, some degree of choice in this area. This investigation into saying that which is useful or helpful is also about really looking at what's going to contribute. What's worth saying? What's actually worth saying? So with any one of these guidelines, we can just take one of them and practice with it. Take it for a day, a week, even an hour. And sometimes you'll find, particularly with this one, saying that which is useful or helpful, that a lot of our speech gets eliminated. It's like, nope, that's not worth saying. Nope, that's pointless. Nope, I'm just trying to look good. I just want to be right, and just checking all of the impulses to speak and see, where is it coming from? What's my purpose here? When we speak without a clear purpose, idle speech tends to go towards the unwholesome. Right? When we're just speaking out of habit, I don't know about you, but my mind tends to go towards complaining, tends to go towards focusing on the things that I don't like, that aren't working, that are wrong, that should be different, right? Partly because of the negativity bias, partly just because of our culture, this sort of hyper-focus on perfection. And so if we're not aware of our purpose, of why we're speaking, chances are we're not cultivating wholesome qualities with our speech. So saying that which is true, saying that which is helpful or useful, saying that which is kind. So in the actual texts, this one is actually divided into two. I tend to summarize it in one because it's easier to remember 4 things than 5. And they're deeply connected. So in the early text, it shows up as speaking in ways that are gentle and affectionate, and speaking with a mind of goodwill. So there's the sense of the intent and the delivery. So I summarize that by saying that which is kind. It's coming from a good place and it's spoken with kindness, right? So this is about where we're coming from inside. Are we actually connected to goodwill? Particularly if we have to say something difficult that's going to be hard to hear. Are we really coming from a place inside that says, I want to be of service, I'm coming from care? And are we able to deliver it in a way, as much as possible, that is kind, that's imbued with affection and care? So approaching interactions with a mind of goodwill is a huge training. And just this, again, can have a profound effect on our relationships and conversations. When we can cultivate that sense of kindness, when we can really come from a place of goodwill, others feel it. It can transform a situation, just a few words of kindness or care. Things have been really hard between us lately. I'm really hoping we can work things out and hear each other. Just that much can change the whole tone and trajectory of a conversation. So saying that which is true, that which is helpful, useful, that which is kind. And last, timing. Knowing the right time and place. Saying that which is appropriate to the context, right? Because we can check what we're saying is really true. We genuinely want to be of service. We're coming from a good place. But if we don't check, is now the right time, it could all backfire, right? Because there's so many other factors. We don't know what kind of day someone is having, where they just came from. So we always want to be sensitive to the context. Is this the right time and place to have this conversation, to say this? And again, the Buddha was really, really flexible. In many places, he says, if you have to say something with sharp words, right? Sometimes we need to be really firm and clear. And not say it in a way that's the most affectionate in terms of the delivery. It can be coming from a very loving place, but we might need to be very, very firm with someone. And there are many examples in the text where the Buddha didn't mince words, or he really chewed people out. But he said, if you have to say something that's hard to hear, know the right time and place. Make sure that it's true, that you're coming from a good place inside, that you genuinely want to help, that it's as skillful as possible, and really pay attention to the right timing. So these four are interrelated. Again, they're like a matrix that balance each other, right? It's not that we always say what's true and all the others go out the window, but they inform each other. So how do we balance truthfulness with kindness? How do we balance saying what's useful with the right timing? How do they inform each other? And what's the effect of training in this way? Right? What do we have to let go of? What do we have to set aside to only say that which is truthful, helpful, kind, and timely? What do we have to let go of in order to listen in ways that are honest, coming from a good place, intended to help? The effect of this is our presence, our words, our listening become a gift to others. We win their trust, their respect, and it shapes our own mind, and it shapes the world around us. So we can take these criteria as principles to guide our speech, our listening, and our relationships. So one of the fundamental premises of not only nonviolent communication, but humanistic psychology, which is kind of the field that NVC was born out of, Marshall Rosenberg mentored with Carl Rogers, who was one of the founders of humanistic psychology. One of the core premises of this practice is the idea or understanding that part of what makes us human is that we all share the same fundamental needs. That as human beings, we are motivated to think, to act, and to speak to try to meet our needs. And these aren't just physiological needs like food, water, shelter, and safety, but we have relational needs, needs for understanding, to be seen, to belong, needs for community and love and touch and empathy. And then we also have higher needs, sometimes called spiritual needs, needs for meaning, for purpose, for peace, for understanding, needs to contribute. So the perspective here is that as human beings, we can understand all of our actions through the lens of human needs, that we can see one another's behavior and choices as an attempt to meet our needs. So just as a plant will turn towards the light, human beings are trying to meet needs. That's one of the underlying perspectives or premises. In Buddhism, the way they say it is all beings want to be happy. Same idea, same understanding. People just want to be happy. How we go about it, that's another thing, right? Whether or not we're doing that in ways that are wise, in ways that are actually successful, in ways that cause harm or not, those are what are known in nonviolent communication as our strategies. That's what we want. Why we want it is this deeper layer of what matters to us. So needs are these kind of fundamental core longings that drive our action and motivate us. Why this matters? Two very important reasons. Number one, When we're not aware of what we want, what we actually need, we don't have any choice. So I want to tell you just a brief story about someone who came to a nonviolent communication workshop and heard this teaching, this perspective. One of the ways it's summarized is everything we do to meet a need. That's the perspective, okay? So this guy's on the way home in his car. He reaches for a cigarette. And as he's reaching for the cigarette, he remembers everything we do to meet a need. So he's like, all right, fine, okay. If this stuff actually works, then I'm trying to meet some basic need here, some fundamental underlying value. What do I want? What's important to me? And he thought about it for a few moments and he realized, I want to relax. I want to take a break. I want to take my mind off things. And in that instant, as soon as he became aware of what needs he actually had, a need to relax, to take a break, he recognized, I don't need to smoke to do that. I've got far better ways of relaxing and taking a break than poisoning my lungs and destroying my health. So when we are unaware of our needs, we are bound to continue repeating the same behaviors without knowing why. When we become aware of what actually matters to us, what needs are driving our behavior, what needs we want to have fulfilled, we have a lot more options. We can be much more creative. So the key distinction here is between a strategy, which is what we want, and that's often tied to a person, a particular time or place, versus why we want it, what it will give us underneath. So one fundamental reason why this is valuable and important, it gives us more choice. It gives us more creative options. That goes not just for ourselves, but also in a dialogue or a conversation. So the understanding from the perspective of nonviolent communication is that our conflicts happen at the level of our strategies, what we want. I want to do this, you want to do that. Right? I think we need to cut taxes. You think we need to fund public programs. That's what we want. The more we can identify why we want it, what the underlying aims or needs are, the less conflict there is and the more creative we can be in brainstorming and figuring out strategies. So identifying needs leads to more choice and creativity. This is one value, one purpose or use of this. The other is that it allows us to access compassion. So in contemplative practice in Buddhism and other forms of contemplative training, one of the ways of accessing compassion is this reflection, just like me. Right? Another human being wanting to be happy, another person who suffers, just like me. Compassion comes from being able to see our shared humanity. But how do we do that when we really disagree with someone or when they've done or said things that have harmed us? This perspective of human needs gives us access to compassion because we can begin to understand their choices or behavior in another way. To see, just like me, you're trying to meet some need that I also have. And this is part of the definition of needs, is that they're universal. They're personal in the sense that we each experience them intimately, whether or not our needs are met. We feel that directly. But they're also universal in the sense that they're shared. Just as I have a need for rest or play or creativity, so too do all of us have needs for rest and play and creativity. How important those are to each of us and how we meet them is going to differ. But the fact of that need is the same. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to do a couple of different practices with this perspective to see how it applies in our life. This is what we were practicing in the listening exercise, in the third kind of listening, of what really matters to this person. Probably, not for all of you, but for some of you, probably what you were aiming at or asking into was this deeper layer of the human needs, the underlying longings or values that motivate us. So the aim in a dialogue is to try to build as much mutual understanding about what actually matters to both of us. to really understand what's important to you, to help you to understand what's important to me, and then to hold together all of those needs. So another core principle in nonviolent communication is that all of our needs matter. So we live in a society that functions on an either-or model. It's either mine or it's either me or you. It's a win-lose thing when we have a disagreement or a difference. And our life experiences have confirmed that view. And so then if those are the experiences we're having, and that's the way we're looking at things, whenever there's a difference or a conflict, we're going to go on the offensive or the defensive, because if it's an either-or game, I know which side I want to end up on, right? So what we're trying to do here is to hold a different perspective, to actually recognize the possibility of what's known in communication circles as a win-win, the possibility of meeting as many needs as possible, of working together to identify what's actually important, and then collaborating creatively to address those. So in order to do this, what's needed is a training in our attention. So we start with presence, showing up. We come from a helpful intention, the default being to come from curiosity and care. And then we focus our attention. We learn to shift our attention from what we want to why we want it, from what someone else thinks or believes or does to why they think, believe, or do that, from the strategy level to the need level. This shift in our attention is a specific training to identify the underlying human needs in a situation. So I want to do first a guided meditation, a guided reflection on this. But maybe first, let's just do something together out loud. So just to kind of make this connection a little bit more clear. So someone taking a walk in the park, what needs might they be trying to meet? Health, what else? Relaxation. Space. So notice how the same activity could be an attempt to meet many different needs. They could be trying to meet more than one of those. Someone else, choose another action that a human being might engage in, another behavior. Eating. What needs are you trying to meet by eating? What needs could a human being be trying to meet by eating?
Reducing anxiety.
Okay, so reducing anxiety, so comfort, hunger, satisfaction, what else? Nourishment, what else? Companionship, enjoyment, right, social connection. So the same activity could be meeting many different kinds of needs. Okay, you want to meet your need for meaning. What might you do? Right, what else? Volunteer, what else? Meditate. Okay, lots of different choices once we identify the need. Someone else throw out another need that a human being might have. Autonomy. So what are some strategies or actions that you might engage in to meet your need for autonomy? Creative expression, so art, dance, what else?
Vacation.
Taking a vacation. Fighting, yeah. Running your own business, right? So I love that you said fighting, right? So this is the power of this perspective, right? Someone yelling, someone screaming. What needs might they be trying to meet? Need to be seen, need to be heard, right? So need to control. So I'm glad you said that. So I wouldn't define that as a need, because for me, a need is something that everyone has that I want for everyone. So it's that need for control is still, I would say, more at the level of a strategy. So if somebody wants control, what does that give them underneath? What might they be needing underneath the control? Safety, security, what else? Choice, stability, agency, right? Agency and power, some of our most important needs as human beings, to know that we can have influence over our environment. Okay. So, you get the sense? You get the idea? So this is a training of attention, learning to shift our attention from the level of strategies, of the choices and actions, we or others are engaging in to the level of needs. Why? What matters to you? This gives us more choice and opens the door to compassion. So I want to do a couple of activities to explore the implications of this perspective. And the first is a guided reflection. And take a few moments to just settle your attention. And so I'd like you to call to mind a situation in your life where something's unresolved. Could be with another person, could just be in yourself. But again, don't choose the most difficult or challenging thing, because we're trying to learn a tool here. So on that scale of difficulty of 1 to 10, again, choosing like a 4, somewhere in that range. Could be a disagreement you had with someone, or somebody did or said something that kind of rubbed you the wrong way. Or they didn't do something that you were expecting or hoping. So allow that situation to just come to mind. Recollecting what specifically did or didn't happen. So one way to begin to explore what matters most to us in a situation, what we actually need, is to identify a strategy that would have worked for us, that we would like. So in this situation, if it involves another person, what could they say or do that you would enjoy more? Or if it's just involving yourself, what particular action or behavior would you be more pleased with? So try to make it as specific as possible. Whether or not it's in the realm of possibility doesn't matter. But what's a specific action, behavior, statement that would satisfy you, that would be more enjoyable or fulfilling? And just use your imagination to think of that. And once you've got that in mind clearly, I want you to ask yourself a question. So if that happened, what would that give me? What's important about that to me? Why does that matter? And just see what comes inside. Whatever you hear, whatever you find, ask the question again. And if I had that, then what would that give me? Or what matters about that to me? Why is that important? keep asking that question. If I had that, then what would I have? Or what matters about that to me? Keep descending down through these layers until you arrive at something that feels core, like you hit some kind of bedrock. Oh yeah, that's what matters. What are you really needing or wanting in this situation? Can you boil it down to one word, 2 words? What's the essence of what's most important to you? What really matters? That you're wanting more of. So once you identify a need that you have in the situation, the last step is to let go of the situation itself, the circumstances, what did or didn't happen, the fact that this need wasn't actually met. Just see if you can let that go, just to let that fade into the background. And instead, I want to invite you to become aware of this particular need in and of itself as a particular facet of what it is to be human, as just a part of your heart, regardless of whether or not it's satisfied. To just recognize the innate value of it. Oh yeah, this is important, this matters. Not just to me, it matters to everyone. Whether it's respect or understanding or trust or consideration, whatever it is you're valuing in the situation. You might even say to yourself, just as I deeply value this, so too do all beings long for this. See if you can touch the more universal aspect of this need. Can you sense its innate value in and of itself? The dignity, the beauty, the wholeness of this particular quality. And then in your own time, when you're ready, allowing that to go too. Just coming back to feeling your body sitting or reclining, maybe feeling your breath. Bringing your attention back into the room. Bringing some movement into the body, maybe looking around. So how many people were able to identify something that mattered to you, some kind of a core need in the situation? Great. How many people, when you first identified it, did it come with some feeling of pain, loss, displeasure because it wasn't met? It was like, yeah. How many of you were able to shift your attention from the situation to just the need itself? And to feel that sense of like, oh yeah, this is a good thing, regardless of what happens. So this is the process of training our attention that allows us to connect with one another and, very importantly, to express our needs without attachment, blame, or demand. To be able to take responsibility for what's important to us and to recognize that whether or not you can meet my needs, they have value. And I can appreciate and feel and sense that in myself. It's not that it doesn't hurt or that I won't be disappointed or upset if my needs aren't met. But that sense of the narrow fixation on I need you to, no, you're the strategy, right? I can actually sense the value of the needs in and of themselves. I'd love to hear just a few of the words. What was it that you identified mattered to you? Anyone willing to share what that word or phrase was that you came to? Play. Value. To be valued? Yeah. Respect.
Unconditional love.
Unconditional love. Security. Inclusion. Understanding. Notice how it is to hear these words. Respect, inclusion, understanding, security, play, to be valued. You feel that knowing inside with each of those words? It's like, yep, I know that one. That's how you know you've gotten to that level of needs. Something inside connects and goes, right, yeah, I get that. That's how we know we're getting to that level of our shared humanity. How many of you feel a sense of more empowerment or choice or creativity now that you're clear about what matters to you in that situation? Raise your hand, I'm curious. Okay, not as many as I would have hoped. We'll keep working on it. So here's what I'd like to do next. Well, actually, let me pause before introducing something else. Questions or comments about this this material or that activity? Yeah, Karen. Right. So tomorrow today we've been focusing on the inner foundations of presence and intention and listening, and this ability to identify what matters, which is the third step in the model that I teach, how to focus on what matters, which at the root are our needs. There are many other things that we can focus on. The next step is to, in the situation, maybe to express ourselves. And so that's what we'll be looking at tomorrow. How would we speak? How would we share a message with someone else about what we've identified that's important to us and make a request for conversation, for understanding, for something different to happen? The first step is being clear about what's going on for us. And then the next step, which we're going to do in a moment, is using the intention to understand, to stretch and try to envision what might matter to the other person, so that we are humanizing them instead of seeing them as an enemy or being locked in our judgments or blame about them. Other questions or comments? Yeah, Dwayne?
Will you be talking about non-self, anatta, and the role that it plays in
Sure. Yeah, so Dwayne said, could I talk some about non-self and anatta and the role that it plays here? I'll give a brief response. So needs are from this perspective, and in my view, Needs are a fact of being human. It's not a question of whether or not we have needs. It's part of our biology. That's part of what it is to be human, is that we meet our needs interdependently. So the question is, what is our relationship to our needs? Is there a sense of grasping and identification, or is there a sense of openness? So it's not whether or not we have needs, it's how we relate to them. So the teachings on anatta are actually what allow us to express our needs and hear others' needs in a free way, to not be narrowly demanding that you must meet my needs, and also to not feel obligated or pressured to meet yours, because there's an understanding that while the need is located on a relative level in me or in you, on another level, there's no identity with them. It's just different conditions that are arising and changing. And the needs that are alive in me in any given moment change based on the circumstances, just as they change in you. So I can be aware of, for example, a need for intimacy, say. How I relate to that need is what is going to determine whether or not there's suffering. If there's a relationship of identification to that need, I need intimacy. I need intimacy, right? Then there's going to be there's that grasping, the upadana, and then there's going to be less room and space in the dialogue to express that in an open way, for you to hear it, for more creativity. Whereas if I'm able to acknowledge the truth of this moment, which is, oh, there's a need for intimacy here. There's a deep longing for that. It's just a longing. It doesn't belong to anyone. It's not mine. That not belonging to anyone doesn't mean I can't still act on it. It's actually what enables me to act on it in an open-hearted way. The non-identification that says, hey, it'd be so lovely to have some more intimacy. Right? There's an open invitation. Yeah, you're welcome. It's a very important question, and not one that I get to talk about a lot, because I'm not often teaching in contexts where there's many of my workshops and trainings are more secular, and so the teachings on anatta aren't brought up as much, so I'm glad you invited the opportunity to share on it. Yeah, Punit.
I guess there's a
Puneet.
little difficulty because in English, need
Mm-hmm.
almost represents that I'm going to really suffer unless I have it.
Yes. And it's a tricky terrain. On the one hand, I think that there's Mickey Kashtan, who's a colleague and friend of mine, who was one of the co-founders of BNVC, and I have talked a lot about this, and she really opened my eyes to the fact that there's that word need, it carries that weight for a very important reason, because they are needs in the sense that when our needs are not met, not only does it hurt, but if they go unmet long enough, it creates damage. Not just physiological needs. Like if our relational needs for love or understanding or to be seen go unmet long enough, the human spirit gets twisted. It creates damage. So they are needs in the sense that we do need them. Just as much as we need food and water and air, we need love and understanding and meaning and belonging. The damage is just further delayed in time when those needs aren't met. That doesn't mean that we always need to have our needs satisfied, right? Because true choice is internal. So there's a way that I can meet my own need for belonging and choice and power, even when the conditions around me don't support that. There's that possibility, at least, if I have enough inner resources. And that's part of this training, is to continue to develop our own inner resources so that when the conditions around us don't meet our needs, we still have choice and flexibility, because we're able to have a different relationship with our needs inside. So that's one perspective, is that that word need is communicating the power and the importance of these parts of our heart and our being. At the same time, I'm of the view that because of the connotations that the word need carries in the English language, particularly the connotation of demand. I need this, and I need it now. I think that the word need is unfortunate in that sense, because it comes along with associations that aren't actually intended. So I often will use the phrase "what matters" instead of needs, or the word value, which in some contexts works really well and others doesn't. Yeah, Lori?
Having said that, brings up something I've been thinking all day about communication.
Yeah.
And that is, are we considering communication with ourselves the same as the communication
Absolutely.
with everyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. She's asking, are we considering communication with ourselves as much as with others? Yeah. This is very much about our internal communication and learning to understand the messages, the judgments, the self-blame, the self-critical voice, whatever that is, from a different perspective, and being able to apply the tools internally. Much of the work in communication and relationship is about our level of self-connection and the clarity that we have inside about what's happening. When we're able to have a full self-connection, awareness of our needs in an open way, without that quality of attachment, that's the place that we want to be able to have conversation and engage in relationship from. Yeah.
So are we supposed to be doing that simultaneously as trying to figure out the needs and what matters to the person we're talking to as well?
So in a conversation, so these skills develop slowly over time. The first training is just being able to start to see things from this perspective. Oh, you have needs. Oh, I have needs. Like, right, of course. What am I needing here, right? So when we're upset, when we're angry, when we're depressed, when we're down, it's like those are our emotions, are signals, they're information that point to our needs being met or not. So to start to listen to that information and understand at the deeper level, what is important to me here? What actually matters, and what's important to you? So that's the first step, is just learning that shift in our attention. And then over time in a conversation, there's this kind of dynamic shifting of our attention from ourself to the other person, back and forth. What's important to me? What's happening here? Okay, what's happening for you? Can I understand that? And being able to navigate that terrain. Yeah, so I don't know if I would say we're doing it simultaneously, but it's something that's happening in more of a rhythm. And that takes practice to be able to do that. To be able to, one of the reasons why we resist coming from the intention to understand or really listening to someone else is that we're afraid if I actually listen to you or show some understanding, you'll think I'm agreeing with you, you'll use it against me in some way, or I'll lose what's important to me. And so we have to feel confident enough in knowing what matters to us and our ability to speak up and advocate for that before we will feel free to really listen to someone else. Right? If I'm not sure about my own thing, and if I don't actually feel empowered to speak up and invite you to listen to me, it's very difficult to listen to you without abandoning myself. Right? And so, again, many of us have been conditioned in different ways. Some of us are conditioned to automatically give up what's important to us and be there for others, whereas others are conditioned to not pay as much attention to what others want or need and focus more on our own needs. So depending on where we fall on that spectrum, we might need to move in the other direction in order to find the balance and flexibility. Yeah, Irene? Okay, so I'll just kind of summarize it. Irene's asking, are the implications of what I'm saying that if our needs aren't getting met, that it's harder to kind of have this relationship of non-attachment or non-identification, or not put another way, one needs to have a sense of self before you can let go of the sense of self. I think there's a lot of merit in that way of looking at things. I think there's some truth there that it's very difficult to see. It's very difficult to see a different perspective on our needs when they haven't been met to at least some level of basic level. It's possible, but it's much harder and rarer. So, for example, Abraham Maslow proposed a hierarchy of needs, right? And so in that model, we can't attend to our relational needs or our higher needs unless our basic needs are met. And there's truth to that, right? If people are living in a war zone or don't have food to eat, it's very difficult to think about meaning and creativity and empathy and love. And yet, I think that we all have experiences every day, and history is full of examples in which human beings rise above the circumstances of the moment and are able to meet higher needs when more basic needs are not met. So I don't think there's an absolute hierarchy of needs, an absolute hierarchy. There's a relative hierarchy. And what I've seen in myself and in others is that particularly when there are wounds around specific needs, right? Like early childhood wounds or wounds, that we carry in a society that is racist and patriarchal and homophobic. When there are deep wounds around places of our identity or self, the healing process of being able to sense that innate wholeness around a need is much easier and supported by having that need actually met at least a little bit, right? To really start to feel if it's like, I'm a worthless piece of what, right? If having that sense of being valued and seen for our innate goodness or wholeness, even getting that a little bit starts to send a different message so that we can then internalize it and recognize, oh yeah, I do have that inside myself. So I think it's possible without, but I think it's much, much more challenging and rare. It takes tremendous inner strength to make that leap without at least having some of those messages coming in around those needs.